right, now we're going to travel to ancient Egypt. I'm going to talk about an overview, where they lived, when in history this was, and what they created. So, chances are you've heard about ancient Egypt before. It is a window into the beliefs and customs of the Egyptian people. So, you've probably studied this in class before. You have probably heard about pyramids or mummies before, whether you've watched a movie or learned about it in class or in church or in synagogue. A lot of us are familiar with ancient Egypt. Oh, and it's fascinating. That's why we've been talking about it for a while, because the history of ancient Egypt is really, really cool to study. So, ancient Egypt was a culturally rich place that produced many great works of art and architecture. So, this is where it is in the world. I used yellow for Egypt. You can see it's right in the upper corner of Africa. This is kind of how ancient Egypt was structured. You can see several different pyramids and monuments in this little map here. So there was desert from to the east and west, and the Nile River runs right through this desert. We talked about this last time with Mesopotamia. Usually when we have a civilization, there's a natural resource that made it possible for people to live there and not die. So this Nile River made it possible to have soil and have farming. And the Egyptians had this completely different way of farming because they're in the middle of the desert. They were able to have farms and produce great food and a great culture from that. They also mastered irrigation and flood control. Irrigation just basically means controlling water for plants. They kind of had a different structure than Mesopotamia in that they united themselves a little bit early. So it wasn't just a bunch of different city-states. Pharaoh Narmer in 3100 BC united the people of Upper and Lower Egypt, making a 3,000-year civilization known today as ancient Egypt. Think of that, 3,000 years. So the ancient Egyptians were around for 3,000 years, which is longer than the amount of years we have now in AD, right? Isn't that crazy? So the Egyptians were around longer than anything after AD. Let that sink in. That's a crazy long amount of time. So much so that I had to make a special timeline for ancient history. So historians usually divide the civilization into several periods, being the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. Makes sense. The Old Kingdom's the oldest, the Middle Kingdom's the middlest, and the New Kingdom's the newest. So here's the timeline that I made. I built right on top of the ancient Mesopotamia timeline so you could sort of see how they layered. So the ancient Egyptians were around the same time as the ancient Mesopotamians. And you can see them down here in yellow. What were the Egyptians known for? So the Egyptians were an incredible civilization with a rich history. Art in ancient Egypt was all about religion. So pharaohs proclaimed themselves the living Horus, the falcon-headed sky god. Cool nickname, right? They spent their lives preparing for the afterlife. Common people were buried in simple sand pits. The tombs of Egyptian nobles and royalty were filled with treasures, including sculptures, wall paintings, diamonds, gold, everything. Egyptians believed those works of art were necessary for the survival of Ka, or the immortal human life force. So, as you look at the art in this unit, I want you to think about if you believed that you had to prepare to survive for all of eternity, and when you got there, you would have no idea what to do. How would you rule your life, right? So the Egyptians were sort of, for their entire lives, preparing for the afterlife, preparing for all of eternity to make sure that they were going to be okay. The art that we're going to talk about hieroglyphics, papyrus, tomb paintings, burial sculpture. We're going to talk about Prince Rahotep and Nefertiti. We're going to talk about the Book of the Dead, and I'm also going to talk about King Tut and the Mummy's Curse as a little bit of an extra. And then with architecture, we're going to talk about what a mastaba is. We're going to talk about Karnak and Luxor. We're going to talk about the pyramids too, as a bonus. All right, so the things that this connects to as far as what you have to complete in the Blackboard and the OLS. In the OLS, you have to read lessons 3.03 and 3.04, but this summary is, basically that, but simplified. You're going to have to go through your vocabulary words. You're going to have to take the Mesopotamian Egypt quiz, and a lot of this sort of relates to writing assignment number 3. Um, Basically, both of these 2 weeks are related to writing assignment 3. All right, I hope you enjoy learning about ancient Egypt.